In the 1890s, Ivan Pavlov had exactly zero interest in psychology. He was a strict, highly meticulous physiologist concerned entirely with the mechanics of the animal body. Working out of his laboratory in St. Petersburg, his research objective was incredibly specific. He wanted to measure the exact volume of saliva a dog produces during the digestion process. The starting premise was simple. When food enters a dog's mouth, saliva is produced to help break it down. It's an automatic, hardwired survival reflex. At the time, the scientific consensus held that these physical reflexes were completely isolated from the outside world. Biology was biology, and the environment had no power over involuntary physical reactions. But a problem arose that threw off his precise measurements. The dogs started producing saliva before the meat ever reached their mouths. They would start drooling as soon as they heard approaching footsteps down the hall, saw a lab assistant enter the room, or even caught a glimpse of a white laboratory coat. Pavlov realized the animals weren't reacting to the food itself. They had learned to read specific signals in their environment that meant food was on the way. A purely biological reflex was being triggered by an external, non-biological event. The dogs had learned an involuntary response. To understand how that was even possible, Pavlov abandoned his digestion research and pivoted entirely to studying behavior. To test this learning, Pavlov needed to strip away the random, messy variables of his lab. He couldn't rely on something as inconsistent as footsteps or lab coats. He needed a totally isolated, neutral signal, something that meant absolutely nothing to a dog. He chose the steady, mechanical clicking of a metronome. First, the natural state. Meat is the unconditioned stimulus, causing a reaction. Drooling is the unconditioned response. Next, the engineered state introduces the metronome as a conditioned stimulus to see if it produces a conditioned response, salivation triggered entirely by sound. By defining these variables, Pavlov turned a lab accident into a precise framework for testing exactly how the brain gets programmed by its surroundings. In stage 1, meat causes salivation, but a metronome does nothing. In stage 2, Pavlov repeatedly paired the metronome with meat. The brain actively linked this noise to a survival resource. Finally, in stage 3, the metronome alone triggered drooling. This sequence demonstrated that a biological system is completely malleable. Through repetition, an artificial signal successfully hijacked an innate survival reflex. Once that new association is written into the nervous system, Pavlov wanted to know if it was permanent. Could this new neurological connection be broken? To test this, he subjected the dogs to what he called experimental extinction. He ran the metronome repeatedly, continuously, and never offered the meat. This graph tracks the results. The salivation volume drops rapidly against the number of metronome ticks. The brain realized the sound no longer predicted a meal, stopping the reflex. After a rest period, Pavlov reactivated the metronome. The reflex returned instantly, indicated by this sharp spike. The sudden return of the reflex proved an unsettling reality about how we learn. Those associative connections are never actually deleted from the brain. They are merely suppressed, lying dormant until the right environmental trigger wakes them back up. This exhaustive, measurable approach earned Pavlov the Nobel Prize in 1904. His departure from strict digestion studies had paid off. He had laid the structural foundation for modern behavioral psychology, heavily influencing early American researchers like John B. Watson. And it set the stage for later behaviorists, namely B.F. Skinner, who would spend decades mapping exactly how environmental variables dictate our actions. Today, classical conditioning is actively utilized far beyond the laboratory. It is the mechanism driving corporate branding campaigns, the root cause of how phobias develop, and the reason your heart rate spikes when you hear a song tied to a vivid childhood memory. Pavlov's accidental discovery redefined the boundaries of free will. He proved that our minds and bodies are continuously, involuntarily being programmed by the environment around us.